Okay, Kendall, are you ready?
Yep, I'm good to go here.
Billy, are you ready?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, we have a lot of people on tonight. We can see the numbers popping up, so that's very encouraging. I want to welcome everybody this evening to this program. And our two guests are Billy Shell and Kendall Shell. Welcome, Billy, and welcome, Kendall.
Thanks for having me.
Great. We're glad you're with us tonight. My name is Bill Bomarito. I'm a parishioner at St. Peter's Catholic Church in Kirkwood, Missouri. Tonight's program is provided by the Respect Life Committee of St. Peter's. Our goal tonight is to further the discussion on racism and allow our audience to hear directly from a father and son who have experienced racism in two different generations. We want to remind those who are watching tonight. I've mentioned it a couple times that we are recording the program tonight. You should receive an email from Zoom with that link so that if you want to watch it in the future, you can certainly watch it in the future or anybody you know. And the whole idea here is to share this with as many people as we can because we think it's going to be a great evening. Billy and Kendall, thanks so much. We're going to start off this evening, just some short introductions. Billy's going to do a couple minutes on his background and give us some insight. Kendall will do that. I'll give you a little further insight as to how I got involved with working with various programs in the Kirkwood, Missouri area. And then we're going to start with some very specific and kind of tough questions for both Billy and Kendall. Billy, can you take it from here and give us a little background?
Yes, I sure will. First of all, good evening, everyone, and thanks for logging in. Like Bill said, I am Bill Shell. I am married, been married for roughly little over 40 years. To that marriage, my wife's name is Jean. To that marriage, I've been blessed with three wonderful sons, William II, Sean, and Kendall, which you'll be meeting shortly. I grew up in Kirkwood, attended St. Peter's Parish for 8 years with our host, Bill Bomarito. High school was the start at Vianney, and then I made the transition over to Kirkwood High School. By trade, I am a machinist. I also am one of the chefs with the catering company, Butler's Pantry. I have been officiating high school basketball for the past 35 years. I spent 9 years on the collegiate level, 3 seasons with the pro women. I came back and have been coaching sports at St. Peter's. I coach the kids, all 3 of my sons. Basically, I coach their basketball, soccer, and baseball for a little over 20 years, roughly. And I also coach the senior women in slow pitch softball. And I am honored to be here tonight and be part of this panel discussion.
Billy, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I think it brings back great fond memories for me to know that your dad coached the 2 of us as well so many years ago.
Exactly.
So it's kind of a family affair, and I'm thrilled to be a part of your family. Kendall, if you could take a few minutes, that would be great. We appreciate getting your background.
Yes, for sure. Well, like my dad introduced me earlier, I have 2 older brothers, as well as my mom and my dad, and we are all originally from St. Louis, Missouri. I went to St. Peter growing up for Parish School of Religion every week, and then I played baseball, basketball, and soccer for St. Peter since kindergarten all the way to 8th grade. So I played all my sports. Sports was really big for our family. It was big for me growing up. So that was just my connection with St. Peter's School of Religion. So first reconciliation, confirmation, all things like that I went through throughout my time at St. Peter. But I went to Webster Groves High School. So in high school, I started facing a lot of my peers from St. Peter at the time and things of that nature. So that was a fun time. Played all sports in high school and then ended up coming to the University of Minnesota. I played basketball at the University of Minnesota. I was able to finish my degree in 3 years and play basketball for another year, start some master's work as well, finished all of that out. And since that time, I've stayed here in downtown Minneapolis. So I'm still here in Minneapolis, Minnesota now today and doing some work, a lot of work just with the youth around Minneapolis, anywhere from just kindergartners all the way up to high school, as well as advising some college students as well on the basketball as well as community side of things. So manage an organization with a partner of mine called Hoops in Christ. And we also have a foundation, which is the We Are Leaders Foundation. So those are two things that really occupy most of my time here up in Minneapolis, and just, exposing reality of Jesus Christ and just your faith through sports, as well as using sports as a platform, because that's something that I realized going through all the ranks of sports from St. Louis up to Minneapolis, that is something that can be done.
Kendal, that's outstanding. And if we get to the end of the evening, I want you to give the web address for Hoops and Christ, because it's a wonderful program. Billy and Kendal, thanks for the insight on your background. Let me give you just a few minutes as to how Margaret and I got involved. Unfortunately for the city of Kirkwood, on February 7, 2008, we had a tragic shooting at our city hall, and that prompted lots and lots of emotion, to say the least. There was a grassroots group that got together called CFUH, Community for Understanding and Healing, which then became Community for Understanding and Hope. And we got together to develop what we called dialogue sessions. And it was an opportunity where we would bring in a speaker, and the speakers usually, obviously, they were wonderful and they were great. But what we found was we would break into groups, and we may have a group of, because we would have anywhere on the low end, maybe 100 people, on the high end, maybe 300 people. So we would have anywhere from 10, 15, 20, maybe up to 30 people in a group to just discuss how are we feeling, unfortunately, after this shooting. How are we handling our feelings? And what happened was the Black community who showed up for those dialogue sessions, they started sharing some stories that those of us who are white obviously could not share because we had not experienced that. So even though we were talking about our feelings and we were talking about how we were coping with our feelings, what started happening, at least from Margaret and my perspective, is we started hearing, at the age of whatever we were, 53, 54 years old, we started hearing stories that we really had never heard before. And it became a huge eye-opener for us and for those of us who are on this committee, CFUH. And what would happen is we would go back to these board meetings and we would say to each other, we didn't know what we didn't know. We didn't know what we didn't know. And it was such an awakening. And the bottom line was this, that Margaret and I came up with, and that is waking up every day with your skin color Black presents challenges that those of us who are white just don't have. We just don't have. And those of us who are white have to be more conscious of that. We have to find ways to break those barriers down and to take a look at this in a much different direction. And in fact, take a look at it. I think what happens oftentimes, the white community, we tend to become indifferent about racism. Why? Because it doesn't affect us on a day in and day out basis. And I've had some white people push back on that, and they'll say to me, well, this wasn't a bed of roses, life wasn't a bed of roses for me growing up. It was hard. And I acknowledged their struggles, but then I shared this quote with them. And I would like to attribute it to whomever, but I flat out don't know who came up with this quote, but I love it. And here's what it says. White privilege doesn't mean your life hasn't been hard. It means that your skin color isn't one of the things making it harder. White privilege doesn't mean your life hasn't been hard. It means that your skin color isn't one of the things making it harder. And I don't think there are more true words out there. So we have a lot of work to do. And part of that work is hearing these stories and sharing these stories. And I'm talking specifically to the white community, sharing these stories within your family, opening up these conversations, start talking about this subject. And don't be afraid to use African American or Black or white. Use the terms and let's get talking with these conversations. So what I'm asking Billy and Kendal to do tonight is to answer some tough questions and share some stories with us that I think you will find impactful. I know Margaret and I have found them impactful, and it's led us to continue to work this path as we move forward. So I think for those of us who are white, it's time for us to sit up in our chairs, focus on our computer, take some notes, and most importantly, listen. Listen to the stories. So we're going to start right now with some questions, and I'm going to start with Billy right off the bat. And it's a tough one. I'm sure it's hard to go through these experiences, and then Billy and Kendall will answer each question as well. We're down to about 50 minutes or so, so here we go. Billy, do you remember your first racist encounter? How old were you?
And actually, I do. I guess the interesting part about that is I didn't realize it was a racist encounter at the time because I was in grade school, and I want to say it was second or third grade, but we were in a small town in Arkansas, Arkadelphia, Arkansas, and I was with my mom walking up in town, and we were going to some stores. And while we were walking, this white man decided to start calling us the N-word and spit at us. And my mom simply grabbed my hand and said, just keep walking. Don't say anything. Don't look. Keep walking. And I didn't understand it at the time. Like I said, it was later on in life that I realized, wow, that was my first racist encounter, you know?
Wow. Well, Billy, obviously, I can't imagine, and again, for obvious reasons, I can't imagine what that's like. And not only what it's like for you, but what it was like for your mother, who had to, at some point, and we'll talk about that later, had to sit down and talk to you about what was happening. Thanks so much for sharing that. Kendall, how about you?
Yeah, for me, I would say it probably ties in with my dad. It was an experience with him. It was probably when I was 8 or 9 years old, and it was more of just a verbal thing that I heard and really was exposed to, I guess, some words and names at an early age. He refs high school basketball. If you know him, you probably know that. He's done that for 40 years. I think the game was in Jackson, Missouri, I believe, or around that area. And if you know, when you're refereeing or playing basketball in Missouri, a lot of the normal games are in St. Louis, but then we go to districts, sectionals, quarterfinals. They kind of get placed throughout the state of Missouri in towns that we usually don't go to, I would say, lightly. And so we were at a town, I think I was 8 or 9 years old, and my dad was the only Black referee on the court. And it happened to be an all-white team and an all-Black team. And I went to every single basketball game with him growing up. And I've heard like some stuff, like obviously you always yell at the referees, but it was this particular instance, the section that I was in, it was the first time I heard probably all the racial and derogatory terms there are. And they were all directed at him. And it was a lot of, he's with that team, it's an all Black team there. Obviously we have no ties to them, but happened to be the only Black people in the entire gymnasium at that time. And just during that time, I think that was the first time like I kind of heard and saw that there was an opposition against our skin color.
Wow. Billy, do you remember that story?
Yes, I actually do. And from over the years, I've been blessed with doing all levels of the basketball game, as far as playoffs. I've had the privilege of working the state finals 4 times, and I had sectionals and quarterfinals. And like he said, when you hit the sectionals and the quarterfinals, you go to different parts of the state. I went to a part, was down towards Farmington, Park Hills. And I got to tell you, I was a nervous wreck, and after the game, the cop inside there says, I need to escort you to your car and make sure you get off the parking lot. And I'm thinking, I can't get to the highway soon enough. And Park Hills High School is not close to 67. So I'm like, I can't get to the highway soon enough. The cop, and that's my positive experience, that cop was very polite. He was very nice. And he told me, thanks for coming down from St. Louis and officiating in the state tournament.
Wow. Kendall, do you remember your feelings at all with regard to, here you are in a gymnasium, there's probably 300, 400, 500 people there. You hear them yelling derogatory remarks at your dad of all people. Do you remember what you were feeling at the time?
I mean, I would say it's very just more a fear type of a thing. Like, are they going to try to hurt him after as well? Kind of like at that time, if I remember, you just kind of want to just be in a smaller place, just kind of like not be seen so they don't start saying stuff about you too. And you're
Right.
just kind of there as a kid. And, you don't want to like intervene. Who knows? Maybe if I was like that type of personality as a kid, but if you know me, I probably wouldn't speak up, obviously, at that time to them. So it's more so just, I don't want them to think I'm saying anything or doing anything, and then just hopes that there isn't any, I guess, danger coming after the game. Because
Absolutely. Absolutely. I just cannot imagine. And it breaks my heart that you two or any two African American, any Black family has to go through that. And that's right here in our own state. That's right here in our backyard. Unfortunately, racism is alive and well, and that's part of what we're doing tonight. And that's why we appreciate what you guys are doing here this evening, sharing some of these stories so that we wake up the white community in terms of these are real life scenarios, and they've been going on forever. Here's number two, Billy. I was hoping you could give some insight to this, and of course, Kendal, same with you. You might be able to do this from a little bit different perspective, of course, but there's a thing called the talk that all Black mothers and fathers give to their children. The talk. Billy, can you talk about that a little bit and give us a little insight as to what that means?
Yeah, actually, you try to prepare your kids for different injustices that they're going to encounter growing up being Black. And basically, I told all three of my sons, I said, hey, look, life's not going to be fair. So don't expect it to be fair. But the cases when it is fair, you can celebrate, but don't expect it to be fair. And as far as competing for one of your sports teams or later on in life becoming, trying to do an application on a job, I always try to tell them, you have to be better than average. You simply have to be better than average just to get a fair shake. That is just the bottom line. Accept it. And my wife and I have really tried to stay away from the word racism because we never wanted to implant anything into our kids' heads that they start thinking a particular way towards racism. So we pretty much tried to stay away from that word. And as they got older, then I would let them know, hey, look, you'll be in a car or as a passenger or driving, and you will be stopped. Get ready for it. You're going to be stopped. And when you are stopped, you make sure that your hands are in plain sight so that the cop can see your hands constantly. And I said, at that point, when he speaks to you, you are to be polite. It's yes, sir, and no, sir. You are to be polite because the bottom line is you cannot win your case on the side of the road. You want to be able to walk away alive and fight your case in court or let your parents, us, fight that case for you. So you are polite with that cop. And the biggest thing is we were always big on our Christianity. We want our kids to stay prayed up. And hey, there's times when you're going to be in what seems to be a dangerous situation. It wouldn't hurt to say a quick Our Father. It's not going to hurt at all. And I said, stay prayed up. And no matter what people say or do to you, do not allow them to force you to lose your Christianity. Just don't let that happen.
Wow.
And, having three sons in three different states, Kendal in Minnesota, Sean in California, and Kid in Arizona now, my wife and I, we're a nervous wreck. We always worry about them,
Sure.
Because things happen. I saw a statistic a couple of days ago that said 1 in 1,000 Black males will be killed by a police officer. And it was alarming.
Wow. Billy, scary stuff. I'm so sorry that that you even have to have that kind of talk. Kendall, do you remember hearing that talk from your parents and maybe not, well, and maybe directly, but at the same time, taking that in and trying to digest what all that meant?
Yes, yes. I think it's important, like, to note, like, when we kind of bring up the talk conversation, like a lot like how my dad explained it, it's definitely more of a plural thing than a singular thing. It's one of those things where there's levels to the talk where as you get older, as you get your license, right, you have that talk about what's to happen in the car. As you go over to your friend's house for the first time who happen to be white, you get told about how to act and what behavior you need to be on as opposed to your other friends that are around, especially someone like me, who was at St. Peter a lot. And I mean, I was the only Black kid on my sports team every single year I competed at St. Peter. So I always knew that I had to be aware and know that a lot of eyes would be on me naturally. I mean, that's just human instinct. If there's one different color in the room, you're going to look at that color. So I always just knew, and that's what they always taught me, you know, just know the situations that they put me in, I would stand out in a lot of those situations. So I would always have to put out my best image, and self-image was taught really early by both of my parents.
Right.
And when you talk about the talk, like my mom, like when I get in the car driving, right, make sure I'm sitting up straight, you know, a lot of times, make sure my hat's not backwards, things like that. Like a lot of things like that are unfortunate things that have to be told to us. And I remember the car talk very well, especially when I started riding with my friends for the first time, a lot of my older friends before I had my license. Always just kind of went through what to do when you're in the car. And the reason I say singular is, I mean, my mom obviously was like that, but I think it's a lot of Black moms, they kind of give like a 10-second version of that talk every time you leave the house. It's always be safe, watch where you're going, watch everybody around you, you know, if you get stopped, be careful, things like that. So all those things are in that talk that's always ongoing, but I would say there's 3 or 4 bigger talks depending on kind of what stage of life you're in.
Kendall, thank you. The first time my wife and I, Margaret, heard that story about the talk was at one of these dialogue sessions. We had never heard that term before, and a mother was explaining that she had a child at Kirkwood High School who had, if you will, a set of white friends and a set of African-American friends. And she said if her daughter was going out with her white friend, she'd just say, hey, remember 11 or 11:30 is curfew, get home by then, be careful, see you later. If she was going out with all her Black friends, she would spend 10, 15 minutes discussing exactly what the two of you were just discussing. And I'll tell you, that was a huge eye opener for our family and for everybody that was hearing that information. So, you know, we're hoping that those who are watching this evening take that in and really know that that's reality. That is what is happening, not only when Billy was growing up, but in Kendal growing up, but here in 2020, it's all happening. Number 3 here, Billy and Kendal, we're going to throw just a couple phrases at you, actually several, and just if you could spend a couple minutes and give us an idea of your thoughts, that may help us going forward as well. The following statements, what do these mean to you? Billy, I'll start with you again. White privilege.
Okay, I have to thank you for taking my quote earlier.
What's that?
That was, to me, white privilege is the color of your skin is not going to make your life hard like it will make mine.
Yeah.
And that was based, and you know, we talked before, and I guess I must have said that to you before, but that is my version of it. White privilege, you know, in essence, just like you had said, it does not mean your life is not going to be hard. It just means that your life is not going to be made hard by the color of your skin. But also, you know, white privilege is if you and I both walk into Saks Fifth Avenue, security's not going to look at you. Security's going to walk me around, you know. And years ago, I used to go there to get a particular brand of cologne, Dolce Cabana because that's the only place that I knew that had it. And anytime I went in there, I was followed, you know, and it's just a part of it. I mean, you know, I remember back in grade school or early high school, I guess it was, there was a store, I don't know if you remember, it was in Sunset Hills called EJ Corvettes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I had been playing basketball and I left and I rode my bicycle down there because I was going to buy a new pair of Converse All-Star tennis shoes, which the younger crowd can't relate to that. But at that time, Converse All-Stars were the thing. And having been playing basketball, I had on 2 pairs of socks. I went in and tried on the shoes. I took 1 pair of socks off and tried the shoe on, kind of walked around with it to see how it was, see how I was going to fit, you know, with just 1 pair of socks on. Got the shoes, put my sock back on, and right after I exited the store, security grabbed me and said, "I believe you have something that belongs to us." And I said, "No, I don't believe so." They said, "Yeah, I think so. I think you stole a pair of socks." I said, "No, you can search my bag." And the guy says, "I don't look in your bag, it's on your feet." And he called the cops. I had to sit there on the curb, take my shoe off and take my socks off. And when they verified that those socks weren't new, they told me I could leave. I don't think it would happen to a white person.
I agree. I agree.
You know, so.
Kendall, what does that term mean to you, that phrase?
For me, it's something that's just there. It's always there. And until we talk about it, and I think we're talking about it more now, you don't realize it's there because I think it's very tied to systemic racism and all the things that are built in our society and institutionalized over the years where you don't realize that there are things like an unconscious bias or there are things of that nature when you go into different situations. And it's also one of those things for me, I'll take it from a lens of someone growing up and kind of seeing, looking around and knowing some of the things that even I had a lot of white friends. A lot of my white friends would say, or they would say they would do, and things of that nature. And I just know deep down in my mind, just naturally, even back then at that age, it's just like, wow, you think we can just do that and get away with that? And I think that's something that's already built and ingrained in minds at an early age. And I think that's why it's so hard for, I think, our white allies in a generation before me and older to realize that it's there, because it's something that you just are accustomed to at such an early age. You don't realize that you have privilege when you go into certain situations. You don't realize that if I walked in the same time as you, more eyes would come on me just because more people like me historically have gotten in trouble or historically have been put in situations, whether it's the war on drugs back in the day or things like that, things that have been systemized and institutionalized. So it's one of those things for me that it's just something that needs to be talked about a lot more, because it's a very unconscious thing. You don't realize it's there until it's put out there.
Well, thank you. And that's one of the phrases I was going to throw out also is unconscious bias. And Billy, did you want to add a few words to that, unconscious bias? And it's a phrase or a term that a lot of people really aren't familiar with, but it's becoming more and more the norm. And in fact, there are trainings that people are putting together to deal with unbiased or unconscious bias. Billy?
If I think unconscious bias, I would say that is behavior or reaction to a situation that you're unconsciously doing because of something, a frame of thought that's been embedded in your head that you don't realize, kind of similar to what Kendall's saying. For instance, if I pull into the gas station close to my house and there's a white lady and a white man in the car, the white man gets out and goes in the store and the lady is just sitting there. As soon as I pull up, I can look over and see that she's going to lock her car door.
Yep.
And it's not, at this point, it's not an insult to me because I think that falls in that category of unconscious bias. It's something that they do as an instinct, you know, and quite frankly, in some situations, I might reach over and lock my car door, you know?
Right,
I mean,
right.
it is what it is.
Yep, absolutely. Kendall, do you want to add anything?
I mean, I think it ties a lot to that. You know, it's one of those things where when you're a Black individual in an all-white room, which I find myself to be that individual a lot of times, you just can feel there's a different aura towards how you're maybe talked to, how you maybe presented something. And that's something that, you know, stems back all the way to elementary or middle school or high school. You know, oftentimes I can remember and I can just tell, and even looking at my peers, I could see how teachers or instructors would even present things or talk or react to a Black individual in certain situations. And it's just naturally how they expected so many to be. And often I found myself in that situation until they saw, oh, he's not one that may be wilder than the rest, right? Something that you would assume a lot of times when you're the only Black kid in a situation like that. And that's one of the things that, you know, I always think about. It's just, again, at an early age, you kind of understand, you see that you're just kind of treated differently, right? It's just always, it's not always bad, right? Sometimes it's an unconscious bias that you don't want to be treated, right, a different way, in a bad way, or maybe a forgiving way. So a lot of that for me is unconscious bias.
Good. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. This was a question that came up. In fact, we offered to a group of people to give us questions, and that's how we got these. And that's why we're not taking questions from tonight's audience, because we have several here. But one of them I thought was interesting. And Billy and Kendall, if you could just give us just a couple minutes on your thoughts. And I thought this was interesting. Once again, what does this phrase mean to you? Black on Black crime. Black on Black crime. Does that resonate? Do you have thoughts about that?
My thoughts on that is that's a label that our media and system threw out there on Blacks committing crime. Because in my mind, Blacks commit crime against each other. They also commit crimes against whites. Whites commit crime against whites. Asians commit crimes against Asians, but we don't say Asian on Asian crime or white on white crime. We want to say Black on Black crime. And people say, you know, I've had people tell me, hey, well, when you Blacks decide to stop committing crimes against each other, then we'll start worrying about the cops and others committing crimes against you. You know, I think it's an unfair label, and it's a label that I just really don't care for.
Good. Well, thank you, Billy. That's very insightful. Thank you. Kendall, any words on that?
I agree completely. Probably exactly what I would say. I think it's just an unrealistic label. I think it's an excuse. I think it's something that's usually often seen today as used from the opponents of Black Lives Matter. It's almost like a way to deflect what the issue is of police brutality. It's honestly, to be quite frank, it annoys me because it's almost like you want it to be said when the police brutality conversation comes up as if one issue makes one better, but both are bad. So we don't need to bring up something like that. And again, like my dad said, whites do kill whites often. We don't talk about that statistic. We don't talk about any other racial statistics. And we certainly don't talk about the over-policing of Black communities. And we certainly don't talk about the under-resourced communities that we have. And we really don't talk about the lack of white people helping those Black communities when things aren't going wrong. But a lot of the same white people are quick to talk about Black on Black crime when police brutality happens. So it would be very nice to see them work on it and help throughout the year instead of kind of sitting on the sidelines and judging, especially something where they're not getting in it and knowing and understanding the roots and the causes of it.
Good deal. Thank you. Let's move on here. Billy, I'm gonna come back to you here. How do you feel about the Confederate symbols? How do they make you feel?
Very uncomfortable. I am not comfortable with that. And I understand that that's a part of history and we need not forget that. However, when I look at symbols or statues of Confederate people that some think are heroes, but in essence, the Civil War was not something we should be proud of, period. So to correlate to that, I go to our Christianity. We're taught from an early age about our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. And then we're also taught about the devil tempting us and alive and well, and be on the lookout for him. So if we're going to have all these statues and be so proud of them, of Civil War heroes, and I use that term lightly, then in church, when we've got a statue of Jesus Christ, I pose this question to you: should there be some kind of symbol of the devil in church? Because that's the opposition of Jesus Christ. You know, on the other hand, it brings up, and I'll keep it quick, a quick instance that we were coming from a basketball tournament in a little town called West Plains, Missouri. It's down by the Arkansas border. We're on our way back. Now, granted, in this town, the only Blacks that we saw the whole weekend were the ones that came down with the basketball team. Right. But we're coming back late Sunday night, and me with my good directions made a wrong turn and was away from the rest of the team, and they're gone. So I pull in this little small gas station and I walk in, big Confederate flag on the wall behind the counter. And I asked the guy, I said, excuse me, sir. I said, I made a wrong turn. I'm trying to get back to the highway. Can you tell me which direction to get back to 44? And he says, no, boy, I don't know where 44 is. I can't help you. I said, well, sir, do you have a map? No, we don't have no maps here, boy. You need to keep it moving. So I turn around, I take the hint, I turn around, and as I'm walking out of the gas station, now granted, I've got my family in the car. I walk out, and as I'm going to the car, a pickup truck pulls up, Confederate flag in the back of the truck, a gun rack in the back of the truck, a rifle on it, and two young guys get out, and they just kind of stare at me the whole time. I walk to the car, and I look at them, I fire up the van, and I look at them and see them walk inside the door, turn around and walk right back out. I pull out of the parking lot, they pull out of the parking lot right behind me. I'm driving down the street and I finally find the ramp to get on the highway. They pulled up the ramp behind me, and as I floored it, I saw that they stopped, they turned around and backed down the ramp. So the Confederate flag makes me uncomfortable.
Wow, absolutely, absolutely. Kendal.
For me, it's just a comfort thing, very uncomfortable. You know, things like the story that Dad said with my dad being in all those games early on, racism doesn't surprise me, doesn't scare me, it's one of those things, it's there. I know it's there. I know there are people who feel they are superior than others who don't look like them. And for me, when I see a Confederate flag, which is, you know, oftentimes being in Missouri and going to different tournaments or driving through a lot of the Midwestern states, living in Minnesota, going through a state like Iowa and Missouri being a lot of the same, right? Those areas where you'll just see them. You'll see them around the towns even. And for me, since I know it's there, it's just steer clear. Don't really look them in their eyes. And it's kind of a level of, you know, I guess they just don't know any better. Like, it's just unfortunate, you know, it's kind of a lost cause at that point. For me, it's very much pouring into this next generation of people. And I know that there are just some before us that just don't know any better. And there's not much I can do with the ones that have their Confederate flags in their backyard. But as much as I'll ever be able to do as far as be vocal about why it's wrong and why it shouldn't be out there in public places, I will do that. Things like what happened with NASCAR, that's pretty remarkable. I found out about that actually like 6 years ago in one of my master's classes for sport management. My teacher was actually a NASCAR fan. It was like his favorite sport. So I learned about NASCAR more than I ever have. And that was one of the topics we talked about, was how the Confederate flag was like the symbol. It was the mascot for NASCAR races. And, for me, that's all you need to know. It's just like, if you're around it, right, it's there. You're just like, wow, that's unfortunate. You just like a lot of things in life, when you're Black, you just got to bite your tongue and keep it moving.
Boy, we really appreciate your honesty, both of you. And we're getting down to about 15 minutes or so. And Billy, I'll go back to you. I was hoping you could share one, maybe two stories, and you've shared several stories already. The one in particular, of course, is the one being stopped on 170 coming home. Were you prepared to share that story, Billy?
Sure.
And let me set it up a little bit. When Billy spoke to our parish about a year and a half ago, and he told this story, and I wanted to make sure it got on tonight, because I think there's it was so powerful. I have people today, 18 months later, that said, "Oh, they remember me because I was hosting that night, but what they really remember was Billy's story that he told," and it was so impactful. And Billy and I had set up a call a few nights before we actually did the presentation. And one of the questions I asked him was, can you share with me as an adult, as best you can, maybe far back as you can think, how many times have you been stopped in the St. Louis area by a police officer? And Billy said, it's funny you say that, because a few weeks ago he was with some friends and that very question came up. So they started trying to figure out. Billy tells me that he stopped counting at 45 stops. He stopped counting at 45 stops. Well, Billy and I live about 5 miles from each other. We are in and out of the same area and in and around St. Louis, pretty much the same area our entire lives. We raised families in this area. Guess how many times I've been stopped in the St. Louis area? 0. 0 times. Billy stopped counting at 45. Billy, I'll turn it over to you if you could share that story. And we're getting down to about 15 minutes or so, and I want Kendal to hopefully share a story with us as well. And then we'll start wrapping things up a little bit. But Billy, back to you.
Okay. It happened, actually. I was officiating a basketball game, and I know everything seems to go back to officiating, but I've been doing it so long. But I was officiating a basketball game at Rittner High School, right off of St. Charles Rock Road. I leave the high school and turn on St. Charles Rock Road, and right as I was starting to get onto 170, I see red lights in my mirror. I pull over, car comes up, asks me where I've been officiating a basketball game. Yeah, sure. Let me see your license and proof of insurance. I give him all that information, goes back to the car. And once you've been stopped so many times, when they sit in that car for like 10 minutes before coming back, you know it's not going to be a good night. Well, he sat in the car. Then a second car came up. He got out of the car. He came to the car. And his first comment was, "Boy, get out of the car and let me see your hands." I get out of the car, and he says, "Step to the back of the car." The other cop is, standing on the other side of the car. I step to the back of the car, and they commence, I'll do the short version, they commence to search in the car. They take my referee's bag out of the car, which is a black bag. I've got 2 pairs of black pants in there, 2 referee's shirts, pair of shoes. It's raining. They take everything out of the bag, throw it on the ground in the rain, lay my bag out, take the back seat out, Start searching through there. Meanwhile, I'm getting tired and I make the ultimate mistake, which I know better and tell my kids not to do. Put my hands in my pocket. The one cop closest to me pulls out his pistol, puts it in my face, and says, N-word, if you bring anything out of your pockets besides 10 fingers, you'll be a dead N-word right here on the side of the road. Do you understand me, boy? Yes, sir. I will pull my left hand out first, nothing in it. Then I will pull my right hand out. Pull my right hand out, left hand out. He says, now step back on the sidewalk. I step back on the sidewalk. They continue searching the car. And at that point, a third car pulled up. That third car happened to be the cop that was on duty at Rittner High School while I was officiating. He opened the door for me to go in the locker room to change. He opened the door for me at halftime to go in. He came, he got out, he saw my stuff on the car, he looked at me, made a funny face, and turned and backed up and never said a word. The other cops finished searching the car, and the one cop told me, he says, N-word, get all your SHIT, put it back in the car and get out of our area. I don't want to see you here again. I said, sure. Can you tell me why you stopped me? He says, yeah. When I ran your license, it came back as being arrested out of state on multiple weapons charges. I'm like, really? I got my stuff, put it in the car, went home. As I'm putting it in the driveway, my wife knew I should have been home. She's loading up the kids to come look for me because she knew that I was probably on the side of the road somewhere. The next morning, I called my basketball signer and I said, I will not go back to Rittner the rest of the season, and I will not go back to Rittner next year. One of them things, you know.
So sad. And it breaks my heart. It truly breaks my heart. And I remember when you told that story, I was emceeing that night and I could see people out in the audience literally having tears come out down their eyes. And for speaking in general for whites, we just don't experience that. We just don't experience. And that's why I'm hoping, and I'm so thrilled that so many people have tapped in this evening to listen to this. I hope we have a different appreciation for how difficult it is to be a Black person or a minority of any kind in the United States. We have to change the way we treat each other. Kendal, again, we're running low on time, but because we have another question or so we want to run by you, but would you like to share a story?
Sure, I can try to keep it quick then. I'll try to see. I'll probably go back to college, around college time, just encounter with police on campus. I think for me, it was a big deal because I hadn't really had one, I guess, more so touched physically prior or really that close of an interaction. And I just found myself like, I guess, following all the rules my parents told me to all the way up until that time. And I'm in college at this time. So it was one of those things where I just was not ready. And I'm just going through campus, University of Minnesota campus, back to some houses around that time. There was like a light rain during that time. So I'm like jogging through the rain, have a hoodie on, purple hood, and I'm just going through. And all of a sudden, cops come up to me. And I see there's lights coming up on me, and I kind of turn around, and there's two, and they start kind of yelling out the car, get down, get down, get down. And so I'm kind of stopping at first, kind of concerned, not sure what's going on. So then they did that. So then I got down. And so first thing I thought was like, get down on your knees. So I just went to my knees. Then they came out, pushed me down, because obviously I wasn't down enough already. So they pushed me down to the sidewalk, had my head down, took everything out of my pockets, asked about the weapons, things like that. Didn't say what was going on. They threw me in the back of the cop car. Still didn't know what was going on. And so then at this time, there's a ton of people around, like a ton of people just looking back there. A lot of peers of mine too. So most know like what's going on. At that time, there's a lot of things that I was doing off the court at the University of Minnesota that were applauded upon. So most people are like, what's going on? Why is he in there? And I'm thinking the same thing. And the main problem was for about 10 minutes, there was nothing. Like they just wouldn't tell me what was going on. So I'm just sitting back there, just wondering. They come back, they give me my ID, they give me everything, they say you're good to go. And still didn't say anything. So I'm getting out, and I look back, and then one of them just says, there's a guy with a purple hoodie running around. We thought it was you. And that was it. And at that time, after that, I mean, I'm looking around, people came over. It took a lot of my white peers going up to the police officers at that time, a lot of them to say, what's going on? He's fine. What are you doing? And, you know, at that time, I felt very helpless in the back of the cop car, just like, you know, is that what's needed for me? And completely was just not me. It was just someone who they thought was me. And it's one of those police bias things where they just assume, especially a Black person on predominantly white campus, something like that could be going wrong, or I shouldn't be back there. And so that was my first time where, you know, I knew no matter what you do, no matter what image you do put out there, you're still gonna have to go up against the opposition.
Kendall, thank you. I know that's hard to share those stories. This will be our last question, and because we're getting fairly close to 8 o'clock, and we may run a few minutes over. But I was hoping that the two of you could give some thought, or give some words to the following. What can whites and white families do to help reduce and hopefully rid our country of racism? And we know that we're not running a sprint. We know we're running a marathon. This is going to take years and years and years. But there seems to be an interest, at least, to make changes. And that, if nothing else, I believe is encouraging. So Billy, if you could talk to that a little bit. What do you, I know you worry a little bit about telling people what to do kind of thing, but at the same time, I think that's why we're tuning in. We'd like to hear what, from your perspective, what do you think would help all these or white families, what they can do within their own homes, or maybe even outside their homes, to make a difference in how we look at racism going forward. Billy?
Well, first of all, I'd have to say that there is a small group of racists. The majority of white people are good people, like the majority of Black people are good people, you know, and I don't, when I speak to some of my Black friends, I, you know, tell them, don't categorize all white people because you had that bad confrontation with that one, because there are so many white people that bend over backwards to help you in the business world, in whatever, have you over for dinner, it doesn't matter. So, you know, I want to definitely be clear that, you know, it's a small group. But if I was to say to white families that are listening, that are interested in doing something, I would say dialogue with your kids is the very first thing. You know, to put it in a nutshell, I would say, I don't need you to be nicer to your Black friends, but I need you to have the gall to step up when you're with your white friends and they are portraying or spitting out negative racial things about a different nationality. You know, Sunday's Mass, Monsignor Jack, he talked about hospitality. He didn't say being hospitable to a certain group. He said being hospitable to everybody. Another thing he also highlighted on was, and I'm losing my frame of thought, but he was highlighting on changing your routine. And I know he was all along the line of the COVID-19, but he talked about changing your routine. So I would say, if your normal routine, when you're with your friends and they're talking about something negative like that, racial bias and so forth, if your normal routine was just to sit there and say to yourself, I don't agree with it, but I'm not gonna cause waves, so I'm not gonna say something, pull up your britches and say something. You know, you don't have to be overbearing and tell them they're ignorant and this and that, but get the gall to say, hey, this is not right. And when I look at our parish, St. Peter's, hey, there are white families that have adopted Black kids and have had to deal with some things. And I know some of them families, and they are great people. And bless them and bless anyone that really has the nerve to adopt a child that's of a different nationality, because you're taking on a task. So I would say, you know, white families, have this dialogue and get to understand what you don't know. You know, not knowing certain things about Black culture, ask. Don't be afraid to ask your Black friend, hey, I don't understand this. What about this? You know, have this dialogue and then educate other people in your circle. If everybody that's listening tonight has a conversation with one person and just kind of changes the mindset of one person, think about how much of an impact that'll have right here. You know, that's a start.
Billy, outstanding, outstanding. Thank you. That is a great start. That is a great start. Kendall, do you have a few words?
Yeah, for sure. For me, I would say just have the conversation. Like my dad said, just talk and have that conversation with your Black peers. And it's going to be an uncomfortable conversation, but I'm sure you've had uncomfortable conversations in your life. And this is one that needs to be had to move forward. And whether it's asking questions, whether it's asking about experiences, but just have those conversations with your Black peers, because as a Black man, being surrounded with a lot of white people all my life, I'm not just going to come out and talk about all the oppression that I go through. I'm not going to talk about everything that I go through. That becomes exhausting. That becomes taking steps backwards instead of looking forward. I want to be able to have the conversations. If someone's willing to meet in the middle, I'm more than happy to, but it's very exhausting just to actually keep trying to educate if they're not even willing to. So I would say for white families, just have that conversation, as well as just educate yourself. There's especially right now, we're at an all-time high. You would have to be trying not to understand what's going on to not understand what's going on. You can get it in a podcast form, a book form. You can go on the internet. You can go on Facebook. You can read it in newspaper articles now. There are tons and tons of conversations about social inequities, about white discrimination, white bias, things like that. There are so many things you can do. So just educate yourself, because as a Black man, I'll let you know, I've had to educate myself. We've had to educate ourselves. We've never been taught this stuff. I had to go to summer camp growing up, and I was fortunate enough to have an African American studies class in my summer camp that cost money to go to, just to learn about my family's history. And that's another piece that I'll tie it into. For me, with Hoops in Christ, with We Are Leaders Foundation, for me, it's about the youth. It's about pouring into them, about helping them understand what's happened in the past and what needs to happen in the future. And unfortunately, we have not put them in the best situation to do so. Growing up in an education, we're not taught about our Black history. We're taught about a lot of falsities in our country's history, and we're not taught about the real things. A lot of people saw the new trending topic this past year, which shouldn't have been a trending topic. It's Juneteenth. That's a holiday that should be a holiday. So things like that are also something that needs to change, and educating our youth in the right way and letting them understand actually what happened. And for me, I firmly believe our white allies do have a stronghold in being able to make that happen. I know a lot of our educational leaders, I know a lot of our leaders across universities, elementary schools, high schools, who come up with the various curriculums. They have the ability to make those changes and to change some of the things that are taught, as opposed to just learning about Harriet Tubman, Martin Luther King, and Rosa Parks. We know about those three. They did three things, but there's a ton of people in Black history. So for me, if white people really want to help, I think they need to understand that they have more power in our society than Black people do. And since they do have more power in society, they need to leverage and use that power to help equal the playing field a little bit, whether that's in education, whether that's in hospital and medical, whether it's anywhere else. We need to have those conversations, but there's just too many that just kind of keep going through the motions. And if you really want to make a change right now, use that white privilege. Use that white privilege we've talked about. And as you use it, educate others on what white privilege is.
Kendall, outstanding. Well, we have come to the end of our hour. I am absolutely blown away how quickly this went. And the three of us talked and we knew that this hour would go quickly. And I got to believe the response is going to be extremely positive. So maybe we could pick this conversation up in the future. We would love to invite the two of you back, but we cannot thank the two of you enough. I have a couple things I'd like to say upon closing. First of all, Kendall, could you give us the website for Hoops in Christ?
Yeah, so it's www.hoopsinchrist.com. You can look it up on the internet as well as all social medias. You can follow it that way as well. And then when you go to the website, you can sign up for emails. You want updates about what's going on, events that we are doing as well. Our foundational and charity events that we do as well, whether it's up here in Minneapolis or a lot of things that we're looking to do back in the St. Louis area as well. Just because my partner does do Hoops in Christ with me, is from St. Louis as well. And we both actually ended up in Minneapolis by coincidence. So it's one of those things where we feel called that this community in Minneapolis and St. Louis both need us and our help. And the youth, like I kind of keep reiterating, is what we want to pour into. So yeah, if there's any questions you ever ask about Hoops in Christ, you can let me know. You saw my dad has some stuff there too. So you guys can get some of that gear too. But it's very buckets and blessings. It's just very important, like I said, to tie, sports and arts and education into what you're doing and into these conversations. And real quick, like I just said, when you talk about white families and what they can do, for me, what I'm most appreciative of is going to St. Peter, playing sports for St. Peter, as well as playing down at Matthew Dickey, at Herbert Hoover, if you've heard of those schools as well, in St. Louis on a daily basis. I would talk with my white peers and my Black peers on a daily basis. I would understand what a family like the Bomaritos were like, and what a family that the Shells were like. And so white families can do that more and can do things like, whether it's with Hoops in Christ or other organizations in every community, whether it's sports or arts, and just put the kids in the situations together and help them understand each other, that will be a lot better. And that will go a lot farther. And I also think what that does is that lets the kids to decide. It's not about our parents and teaching them what to do and their values and maybe their outdated values. It helps the kids to decide what needs to be done and what's right. And then they understand each other at an early age. Because I'll let you know, I went to the University of Minnesota, and I'll be honest, there were a ton of white people who told me I was the first Black person they saw. So that's something that we can control. We can definitely control.
Kendall, outstanding. What a great spokesperson for Hoops in Christ. Great job. Well, we've come to the end of our hour. I want to thank St. Peter's Catholic Church in Kirkwood and our Respect Life Committee for hosting tonight's discussion. Thank you very much. I also want to take a second and thank the technical side of this was always the scariest part. Is it going to come off technically the way we want it to? But we have such a great group headed up by Christy Patriti at St. Peter's. Christy, thank you so much. Larry Bomarito was a big help. My brother, thank you. And Antoine Schell was such a big help. Billy's cousin or nephew and Kendall's cousin. So thank the three of them as well. Kendall and Billy in their last question kind of summarized what I was going to summarize, so I won't repeat it all. But I think the bottom line for me, for how I would like to see families move forward, and that has to start at home. These conversations have to start at home. And I think for a lot of white families, not that they're totally indifferent, but because these issues do not affect them on a day in and day out basis, the conversations just aren't there. We have to make time in our lives to age appropriately within the safety, if you will, of our own home, have these tough conversations. And I think that'll help your kids understand where you stand on these issues and what can they do outside the home to be more accepting. When it's all said and done, we're all made in God's image. That's the deal. And we need this to start within each of the homes. And let me get you started on the education side. I don't know how many here tonight have ever heard of a place within Tulsa, Oklahoma called Greenwood District. And if you don't know what, write this down real quickly. It's a Greenwood District, Tulsa, Oklahoma, May 31st, June 1st, 1921. And I can assure you, I never learned about it in any of my history classes. But please go and Google. It'll be your first thing after tonight that you can, if you don't know the story, look up Greenwood District in Tulsa, Oklahoma, May 31st, June 1st, 1921. And it's a story that'll break your heart. And we just don't hear about it because, unfortunately, it affected a huge population within Tulsa, and it was a Black population within Tulsa. And in fact, they were referred to as the Black Wall Street. That's how successful this group, I think there were 2,000 or 2,500, maybe more within that area that just read about it. I think it'll be worth your time. Kendal and Billy, I cannot thank you enough. This has just been outstanding. So we will continue to pray up your mission, Kendal, that you're working on. Billy, we always pray for you and your family all the time. So we thank you so much for what you've done tonight. And I want to, and I think that's about it. I want to, from, basically end with basically saying, from from St. Peter's Catholic Church, this is Bill Bomarito. I want to thank all of you who watched tonight, and I want to thank you in advance for working on bettering yourself, your family, and your community. So for everyone out there, God bless and good night. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Bill. Appreciate it.
Hi, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Bill.
Love you. I'll talk to you later, baby boy.
All right. See you.
Good night.
Mm-hmm.
Long drawn out.
Make sure you turn it off, baby, because remember,